Hey guys, we are doing a good old-fashioned repot. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine to do all my repotting off camera because it's so therapeutic and I don't have to think about things, but then I have nothing to film. So today we're gonna tackle 4 plants that are a little bit overdue for a repot. They're showing signs of being a little bit unhappy in the situation that they're in. I've chosen a bit of a variety of plants in terms of like what we need to do to them to kind of set them up for spring. So I'm going to show you what the plants are, what the plan is for the day, and then we're going to get to work. First is my poor anthurium warocqueanum, or my queen anthurium. This plant has not given me a leaf maybe in like 9 months, a year, 12 years. This is the newest leaf and I don't even remember when this was grown. It doesn't look like, let me see. Just peeling the sheath back on the caterpillar. Yeah, it's not really working on a leaf either. I repotted this into soil last spring. I remember that. It was a repot and I did it just like right here in my plant room. I had up-potted it and I thought it would be happy, but there's something going on here that's not quite right. So we're gonna take it apart, look at the roots, and I wanna transition this to like a tree fern fiber soil mix. That mix has been doing wonders for a lot of my anthuriums. It's sped up my weechii, it's sped up my windlingerii, albeit those do live inside the tent. But overall, this plant has definitely seen better days. You can see a lot of this kind of damage on the leaves. This one, look at this one. It's so bad. This one was such a beautiful big leaf when it was fresh. And a lot of this is fungal. So this plant used to live inside one of my exos, and there was a bit of a time when I would run a small humidifier in the exo and kind of air it out in the evening. This plant got overtaken by fungus. And then since I moved it out onto this shelf behind me, it's like in open air. The fungal stuff isn't happening, but it's also not growing. So I think this one might be the most ambitious one. It's gonna require the most work. Another plant I very rarely show. This is my alba monstera from Erin on Really Botany. It's this kind of like a gift slash I'm gonna get a piece of it back in the future kind of situation. And it grew fairly steadily for me at the beginning, but then it reverted. So I cut it back a couple of times, and then the newest leaf, there's a tiny bit of variegation on it. You can see a little bit more on the back here. So for the amount of time it's spent inside this vessel, it should have a lot more roots. So it obviously doesn't like pon. I have monsteras that really like pon. Erin also, I believe, has albos that really like pon, but she said this one never liked pon. So obviously I didn't listen, and I've been growing it in pon, but it doesn't like it. So I should have listened in the first place. So we're going to transition this one to tree fern fiber. I think that's what I want to do, because it's either that or soil, or tree fern fiber and soil. For some reason, my heart just doesn't want to put it into soil. So that's what we're gonna do, and hopefully she'll root better. This one's gonna be a really quick and easy one. This is my Philodendron peltatum. I don't know if there's like an official name for this yet, but this one is often sold as Sodoroi Af, but it looks a lot like a pastazanum, and it also looks a lot like a mame, but you can see, unlike a mame or plumanii, it has like pretty round petioles. It's almost completely round. Some faint striation on it, similar to gloriosum, and I find it's just like a little bit more glossy than a mame. It's done really well in the tree fern fiber, but it's so top heavy now, and this is too small, so we're gonna get into something bigger. And then lastly, my poor monstera Escalado has not been repot in over a year. I would say it's coming up to like a year and 3 or 4 months. When it was potted into this cup, it was this big, this little node here. So it's obviously way bigger now. It also needs more moss inside its pole. As you can see, it grew past the moss, and then suddenly the internodes started to get longer. So you can see down here how tightly stacked these petioles are, but then up here above the pole it gets a little bit longer, and then this one here, the internodal spacing here is quite a bit longer, and it's trying to push out aerial roots. It wants to latch onto something, so we're gonna build the moss up here and get it into something a lot bigger. It is quite rebound in this cup. I kind of wanted to put it onto one of those D-shaped poles from Lauren, the ones with the honeycomb, because this is getting a little bit, I don't know how much longer it has with this lazy pole before I can't support it anymore, but it's rooted so well into this lazy pole that in order for me to transition it to one of those poles, I'd have to remove the moss from all these roots, and it's not like I can just stuff them into the holes of another moss pole. So I probably wouldn't be able to put it onto one of those poles until I chop it. So for today, we're gonna just go easy. We're gonna get into a bigger pot, still in pond, and extend the moss pole. So the plan for today, I think I wanna start with the pond plants, then move on to the tree fern fibre plant, which is 2. And then we're gonna end up with the tree fern fiber soil plant. I feel like that's a good strategy. So the Escalado is currently in this cup. I'm running out of glass vessels and I haven't been able to find like good size ones right now. They've been getting pretty popular at the thrift store. And then in response, the thrift store is now charging like 3-4 times the price for them. So I haven't been able to stock up for a little while. So we're gonna use this. This is all I have. I usually use these like taller, skinnier ones as risers. So like I'll flip it upside down and I'll put a plant on top of it. So it's not my favorite for this plant. I think I would have preferred something a little bit shorter and wider, but I think it'll look fine. I'm undecided as to whether I want to leave this root mass intact or kind of loosen it up. I usually loosen it up just because like I can't help myself. My hands just want to like untangle all the roots, but I'm not changing the substrate or anything. So it doesn't seem necessary. And it might actually fit into that cylinder pot a lot better. So actually I might just do that. My plant bin is like almost empty. I allowed myself to mix up this much mix, which is my usual mix that I use, which is Lechuzapon, Perlite, and Orchiata, because I've been putting off making the DIY pond video for so long, and as long as I have pond inside this bin, I'm gonna keep putting it off. So I want to run out of pond, and then I'll have no choice but to mix some more, and we're gonna make a video on how to make your own pond mix. I don't know why, but I definitely built that video up a lot more in my head, and I've kind of gotten a little bit just overly anxious about it, because the more I researched into substrates and the benefits of all the components, the less I felt like I knew, and the more I felt like I needed to read. So that's kind of where I'm at and why it's taken so long to get that video out. We're gonna sit you a little bit higher. I actually might need to loosen it a tiny bit here at the top, just because it's so wide at the top, it's gonna block pond from falling around this cylinder, if that makes sense. I'm just gonna try to make this looser so pond can bypass and get to the sides. And maybe this will be enough. I think we can work with that. Okay, let's fill her up. Just using this stick to push the pond down the sides. I think I need something wider and flatter, so I'm using one of these plant tags that I get from Equigenera when they import. Actually no, these used to come with Equiflora, Tropicals plants, but they don't send these anymore, but these are really useful. I've been hoarding them. I never throw them out when they come with the imports, just because I reuse them and use them as plant tags or as planting tools. Why won't you fall down? I really thought not loosening the roots would make it faster, but it actually is slowing me down. I guess we're gonna have to loosen the roots. Dang it. Let's pull you out. I'm just kind of like watching the bowl for any dead roots falling off or breaking off, because I'm gonna use this pond again, so I'm fishing them out as I see it, but so far there's almost been none. which is great. Okay, I think that's good. We don't need to loosen up this middle bit, but this is now quite narrow. I'm gonna chuck you back in here. These are the roots that we lost. Alright, so the substrate is now done. Now we just gotta extend the moss. Which means we need one of our trusty dusty plastic sheets to make more of these little straps. And while I'm at it, I'm going to make a lot more because I really hate these straps I made. I don't know why I made them so skinny, and they're all kind of like different diameters, so they're like different degrees of tightness. So I'm gonna pick one that I like, and then we're just going to duplicate it. I like this one. Yeah, this is a good one. Okay, so I want them a little bit thicker. So at least probably like 1.5 inches. No, an inch. An inch. Every time I do this, I tell myself I should just like make a ton of them so they're all very uniform the next time I need it, but then I never do. I actually should just make like a template, like out of cardboard or like cardstock or something, that just shows the diameters and then the lengths and where you should cut the slits. I mean, that would be the smart thing to do. And also, as an aside, for these like extra pieces of plastic, so these are the pieces that I cut off the ends, and they're not quite long enough to do anything with in terms of like a lazy pole strap. I've been toying with the idea of making these into clear plant tags. I just don't know how to label it in a way that like it won't rub off. Well, I was told from other people who have like played around with making clear plant tags is that Sharpie will rub off with a repeat movement and stuff. Eventually the Sharpie will just kind of be erased. So I feel like something like this, and then if you just kind of like clean up the edges, you could use a label maker with clear tape and just label it like that, and that could look okay. So I'm gonna actually save these, and then I'm gonna cut the slits at the same spots as my template. Roughly halfway up, and we'll do the same on the other side. Now we have more straps. So I'm just removing the straps that I really don't like because they're not the right size, and then replace them with the nicer ones. I don't know how to do this in a way that you guys can see. Okay, I don't think you saw any of that. Let me just change the angle again. Maybe you can kind of see. Okay, so I've added straps up here to the top where this stem is extending. The stem is encased inside of the strap, and then we're just gonna add moss to it. I don't know if you can tell, but the pole is leaning a little bit and it's not very stable. So last step is for me to add just a rock here to just wedge it in there and hold that pole in place. Although in saying that, this rock is not quite big enough, so I might need two. Or, seeing as I can't find another rock, I'm just gonna pile a bit more pon on the side where there's no rock. And then hopefully that will hold the moss pole really stable. Okay, that's so much better. So basically I've bought myself up about a month's time before this Escalado needs work again, because it's pretty much at the top of the pole. So after this leaf unfurls, the next leaf is probably gonna be past the pole, which means I'm either gonna need to chop it or extend it. Most likely it's gonna be a chop. But at the very least, now the base of the plant has a lot more room to stretch its legs. I mean, not a lot more room, but definitely more room. And I won't have to water it as often. I will say this plant probably needed water every like 5 days, and I was just barely squeaking by with my watering habit. So I think it'll be a lot happier. I'm actually contemplating growing this out in my living room because it is getting quite full in the exo that it's growing in. So plant number 1 done. Okay, next up we're gonna do the elbow and get it out of pond into tree fern fiber. And I'm fully expecting the roots are probably rotting or non-existent. Rotted roots. Let me just show you what the roots look like. Okay, so straight off, there are some nice roots, right? There's some white roots over here, but a lot of rot. Just a lot of the ends are rotted off. And I can show you. Oh no, I lost it. Okay, I'll show you this big piece that I took off. So right away, can you see how like wrinkly these roots are? They're brown and mushy, obviously, but they're not like plump and mushy. They're like flat. They're kind of wrinkly and flat and deflated looking. So this is pretty classic sign of dry rot, meaning I underwatered the plant, the roots completely desiccated, and then I rehydrated it, and now they're rotten. Just picking out roots as I go, so I have less to clean out later. Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna manually remove a lot of the rot. I'm just gonna remove as much of the substrate as possible by hand so I can see where the rot is, and I can kind of go in with scissors. It's not terrible. It's not like it's mostly rotted. I think I have, you know, a decent amount of okay roots left. Definitely enough to sustain growth, just not the best growth, obviously. So I'm just gonna go in with scissors and remove anything that's not easily removed by hand. But also, I'm not gonna fuss that much with it because ever since I started using Great White, it really put my mind at ease for like little bits of dead plant tissue and stuff, because I'm so trusting of the bacteria to kind of like break things down and kind of clean things up. So when I have like little tiny bits of rot, I don't really like fuss with it that much anymore. Whether that's misguided or not, it's definitely put my mind at ease quite a bit. So after cleaning up, this is pretty much what I'm left with. If you see this brown, it's alive because you could see healthy roots are coming off of it. This is coming off of that brown bit. It's just like calloused aerial root. So we're not gonna worry about that. We're just gonna get this into a vessel. What vessel should I use? Kind of perfect. This is like a deli cup, but I think this one I got from the reptile store. I don't know what they sell it for, like maybe for like transporting like tarantulas or little lizards, but they have little air holes on top, which I actually don't need, but I hope to get a lot more bulk deli cups as well, just in those situations where like my coffee cups or my little yogurt cups are too small. So we're done with pond. Let's get my tree fern out. I like to mix my tree fern with like my pond mix, which is a lot of perlite, a bit of leca sometimes, leucusapon, and orchiata sometimes, but mainly I'm doing it for the perlite, coarse perlite I should say. Who's texting me? So this is gonna be a super quick repot. Hux? Someone's at the gate. Oops. Don't want to waste that. As much as I love tree fern fiber, what is squeaking? I feel like someone's at the gate outside. Anyway, as I was saying, I love tree fern fiber. It's been doing wonders for my anthurium seedlings. It's actually been a good substrate for some philodendrons as well. The more I use it, the more I like it for how the plants perform in it. But I will say in terms of substrates, it's probably my least favorite in terms of like how it feels when you're using it. It's quite unpleasant just because like it all gets stuck to your fingers. And it's better to use it when it's damp so it's not like all dusty, and it's not like free flowing like pond, like you couldn't just scoop it and pour it. It's clumpy like moss. There's also sometimes these like sharp bits in it. So as much as I love it, I'm not a huge fan of touching it and using it. It's not like soil where like I really want to just get my hands in it. You know what I mean? Uh-oh, my alarm's going off. Crap. I set a timer for an hour, which is about when I needed to stop filming. I'll give myself another 30 minutes. And we're just gonna need to speed up. This one's almost done anyway. So the tree fern is actually quite damp, so I'm not gonna need to water this quite yet. And obviously I don't need to extend the pole because it hasn't reached the top of the moss even. Just gonna squeeze it a few times to make sure like the tree fern has fallen into all the crevices between the roots. Okay, so that's the elbow done. It's not anything majestic. It's not a huge glow up or anything, but this is gonna be the substrate that it rehabs in. But yeah, this one really just needs a little bit of a boost. It's grown quite a few leaves in my care, but it's never really grown fenestrated leaves. It's never really sized up or matured, and then it kept getting chopped back because it was reverting. So I don't know, this is kind of like almost a last ditch effort. Like if it continues to revert, I'm gonna have to cut it below the last cut that I made and try to get some growth down at the like very bottom, and that's gonna be like its last chance at being desirable variegated monstera. So fingers crossed that this one decides to act right. I really don't want to keep growing this plant if it's going to keep reverting, because 90% of the reason I'm growing this plant is so I can get a nice specimen back to Erin, because this was a Christmas gift to her from her boyfriend. So so far it's not been like the best journey, but hopefully we'll get something going this year. So that one is now done, and obviously later off camera I'm going to be watering these plants with great white water just to make sure they're inoculated. Okay, we're going to do a really quick one next because it's also going into tree fern. We are going to get this Philodendron peltatum into just a slightly bigger cup. Really simple. Probably don't need to film this, but we're here, we're repotting, and if I don't do it now, it's probably not going to get done. So this, yeah, I'm gonna need to loosen the roots a tiny bit. Do it into this bowl. This plant really struggled in moss because it always dried out, but in tree fern, like you can see the roots. They're really happy, super pink, super healthy. I haven't had any rot happen, and it's growing a lot faster. This is one of the ones which made me want to use tree fern more, because I was just kind of seeing all the different plants that were reacting really well to this substrate, which is kind of sucks because tree fern is quite expensive. For those of you who live in New Zealand, you can get this really cheap. Let me tell you, I envy you. It's more expensive here in Canada than it is in the States, but to my knowledge, the price in the States is also going up, like everything else in life. Okay, so I think that should be okay. Yeah. I'm just pulling off some of the lower leaves because they're kind of yellowing anyways, and I want to bury this plant a little bit deeper, so see ya. I forget if I already mentioned this in this video that this plant's name is Olaf. I'm going to try to find a photo of it, but this plant came to me because Jane was chopping her plant, her beautiful big Soderai Af, and for some reason, it's like she went in with her scissors or her knife or whatever, and she thought she was cutting at a node. It turns out it was the wrong node, and she ended up cutting only just the cataphyll off of the plant. So it was just this like orangey cataphyll, looked like a carrot. We weren't sure if it was going to survive. There wasn't even a lot of stem attached to it. There were some aerial roots, so we named him Olaf in the hopes that like personifying this plant will make it come back to life. And it came back to life over a long time inside of a prop box in moss, and ever since I moved it to tree fern, it started to actually turn into what looks like a Soderai Af. Like before, they were just kind of like nondescript, kind of like, is it a mame? Is it a Soderoi? Is it a Brantianum? Like, can't really tell. So we're finally getting somewhere. Where did my spoon go? Hello? Spoon? Where could, oh, here. My stomach is like rumbling, and I have an appointment I need to leave for in about 30 minutes, so I'm really gonna be rushing. Okay, that's done. Olaf has grown into a bigger pair of shoes. I really don't know how he's gonna size up in the next few months or over spring, summer. Who knows, like he might surprise me. Like he's one of these plants that I'm gonna probably keep forever because like I've nurtured him back from literally like a sliver of stem like that because the cataphyll had died off, the leaf had aborted. And if you were to like ask me if I wanted to buy a Soderai Af today, I'd probably say no because it's just not a plant that's really pulling me. But this one definitely has sentimental value. Now for the last one. How much time do I have? 18 minutes. Okay, let's haul ass. Okay, so is this too big? So I want to pot the queen into this vessel. That's quite a lot bigger than this vessel. So we'll see. I'm gonna take it out first and we'll take a look at the roots. I think a lot of its unhappiness is because the soil is too chunky and it's drying out more often and more quicker than it probably would like. I am going to remove as much soil from the roots as I possibly can, but I'm not going to rinse it because it's going back into tree fern fiber soil. There's really no need to rinse the soil off, but I do want to get a look at what's going on with the roots. Yeah, the roots look okay. They look like they're intact, but there hasn't been a lot of root growth since I repotted it. Because I remember there was a ton of roots and it was very much like a big mass of roots. Yeah. So the roots are alive. They seem healthy. They're just not rooting a lot. So actually, based on this, I'm gonna put it into that glass vessel because once this gets rooting, it's going to fill that vessel out very quickly. Actually, I'm not gonna mess too much with this like central root mass. I'm gonna loosen up the bottom part so it can kind of spread out around that big glass vessel, and then we're gonna mix up our substrate. You guys aren't gonna be able to tell, but this room has become like a catastrophe over the course of this repot. This is part of the reason why I love repotting off camera. This is the tiniest space to be repotting. And I like to repot my kitchen where I can have like Dateline in my ears and then be drinking some wine and getting all red-faced. All right, so I have a bowl that we can mix tree fern fiber and soil in, but that's not gonna be enough. So we're gonna mix part of it here and part of it here. And together, as a team, they will be enough for this plant. So I'm not gonna measure, but I'm basically gonna eyeball about 50-50 my tree fern fiber mix. Actually, change of plans. Slightly more soil than tree fern fiber. Maybe more like 40-60. Because as I'm watching my tree fern fiber bin get emptier and emptier, and then I think about having to buy another bag of tree fern fiber, we're going to stretch that a bit longer. So we're gonna do a little bit more soil. This mix is like really nothing like very, you know, impressive looking. It just looks like soil. It doesn't look like anything magical, but I'm seeing anthuriums really respond so well to it. And I'm just realizing I didn't put a leca layer at the bottom. That's fine, right? And my leca's downstairs. I think it's okay because I've definitely done no drainage with soil without a leca layer. It just means that like I just have to be careful with the watering, and it's really hard to see how much water you have in a glass vessel when it's completely covered in algae, but this is my Warocqueanum. It's not going to be in high light. The shelf that it's sitting on, none of the plants up there are getting algae because it's not getting as much light. There's no grow lights right above it. They're getting mother light kind of from the front. I'm gonna make an executive decision and say I'm not gonna go downstairs and get my leca because I'm basically completely surrounded by plants and substrate and vessels and a camera and a softbox. So I'm gonna make an executive decision to not do like a layer and just be very intentional about my watering and make sure that I'm just not very reckless while watering this plant. I don't think it's gonna be a problem. And I'm also now remembering that I'm running out of soil too, which means I need to buy soil. Charmaine and I joke all the time that like we're on YouTube and like the payouts that we get, we end up just using it on buying more substrates for the plants. And if you boil it down, we're basically spending all our money on like wood chips and rocks, which sounds quite ridiculous when you think about it. I'm gonna pop her in. I'm not gonna lie, I have really high hopes for this substrate and what it will do for this plant. We're gonna sit her like right here. The thing is, eventually her leaves will hopefully, if I don't mess it up, eventually her leaves are gonna get longer and kind of go beneath the pot. So I guess if I give it a bit more height now, I can delay that a little bit. So we'll go at like this. This is the newest leaf. Just gonna sit like that. And I just like to pull some of the roots to the side of the vessel so I can monitor any new root growth as the plant's getting settled in. You know what? We're just gonna dump it. Time is ticking. Ugh, no, my precious substrate. Okay, that's not quite enough substrate. I have to mix up a little bit more. I'm filling this pot quite high because I'm not putting her on a pole, which queens are actually one of those anthuriums that can climb a pole. I don't think it has to. It certainly can size up really well without climbing a pole, but because it grows more vertically than a lot of anthuriums, people do like to put them on a pole. I'm filling this up quite high because the stem's gonna keep growing vertically a little bit faster than a lot of anthuriums, with the exception of like seedlings. Of course, seedlings tend to kind of shoot up really quickly. So she's gonna have more substrate to root into from above, because for a long time I would just pile moss here, and that moss would dry out quicker than it could root into it. So this top part of the plant never has the opportunity to really develop roots. And then a couple of things I still want to do. I cannot stand looking at this leaf. This leaf basically faces my makeup table when I'm doing my makeup, and every day I have to look at it. And also these leaves make me a little bit sad because of that like powdery mildew look all over it. So while I'm not an advocate of cutting leaves off because they're ugly, with the intention of like letting the plant redirect energy back to the healthy leaves, as if like the ugly leaf is like robbing the plant of energy, it could be directing to other leaves. While that's not true, because like this leaf is still producing energy for the plant, it's still photosynthesizing. My general practice is always to wait for the plant to kind of shed the leaf itself, or for the yellow to extend all the way down to the petiole that it could just be plucked off. But in this situation, I really want to cut the ugly leaves off because I'm a grown woman and I can do whatever I want. And also it's bringing the whole vibe of the room down, and it's pooping on everyone's parties. So we're cutting them off. So if you want to allow the plant to still flower out of the petiole that you just cut off, what am I saying? You should cut the leaf off above where the inflow would emerge from. So at the base, okay, I'm gonna show you from the point of view of my phone. So at the base of the petiole, you'll see this little bump. So if your anthurium's at the age where it's growing leaves out of a caterpillar, then the inflow would be emerging out of the petiole from here. If I wanted to still allow this petiole to produce a flower, then I would cut above, and that felt so good. So this is the leaf that I'm leaving on. So we're getting rid of everything else because I'm sick of looking at these leaves. They make me so sad to look at. I fully acknowledge if I cut these off, it's basically lost 3 big leaves worth of photosynthesis power. So it's gonna slow down a lot, and I'm totally fine with that. I just want this plant to grow healthy leaves without fungal issues, without spider mites, and I just want it to be just a prettier plant. And I have all the time in the world. Like, I've had this plant for so long. I got it as a rehab, I kind of glowed it up, and then I kind of let it decline again. So we've been through some shit together. I have good faith that it will bounce back, and it's gonna be bouncing back in like living room conditions. It's gonna stay on this shelf with the root mass that it has. Like you guys saw that giant root mass. I think it's gonna be totally fine. And it's gonna get inoculated with great white later. So the very last thing we need to do, now that we've cut those leaves off, we're gonna make a little extension right here to get substrate around the stem that's above the soil, above the substrate, so it can produce roots up here. It's very similar to what I was doing before with the moss kind of piled around. A lot of people will kind of tie string around that moss to kind of keep it, you know, compact. Basically the same idea. And it's basically the same idea as doing these little straps for the lazy moss pole. I kind of want it to be like this tall, like, yeah. And we just need to see and then just kind of eyeball where to make the slits. Pop her on. And then I like to just kind of like push it down into the substrate a little bit, hold it in place. I'm gonna fill it with, what should I fill it with? Tree fern? We'll do tree fern. Oh, look how empty it is. I think I have more downstairs, but it's time to buy more. And this is one of the other reasons why I wanted to cut those ugly leaves off, or this is another benefit, I suppose I should say, is to allow for this color to be put on in the first place. With all those leaves, it becomes really difficult to kind of wrangle them back in. All right, so it's just gonna make sure that that's nice and snug. And I think we're done with Miss Queen. All those like little roots that were protruding out will hopefully now be triggered to like start growing. But yeah, that's the last plant. We are done repotting. Woo! Okay, so I am officially running behind now. I really need to stop filming now. I'm gonna call it here. Thank you guys so much for watching this repot. I hope you got some repotting done yourself, or some laundry, or some dishes, or some bathroom cleaning. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah!